Hi folks, welcome to the 11th videocast. We're going to have a chat about the ongoing assault on Salmond from the mainstream media and the various strands it's taken, including a piece that was written today, I think it's in today, the Daily Record, attacking the person of, rather than the content of, the blog he writes of Craig Murray. And we're going to start with talking about the fact that the UK government has apparently taken control of all the purchasing of tests for the whole UK. As I say, maybe start with that. Stuart.
Okay, so on the testing, on the testing, there's a row in Wales, apparently. When it comes to testing, they had ordered 5,000 tests for 5,000 people weekly from Roche, one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. They're doing the German ones, and Germany is the gold standard in Europe at the moment when it comes to testing, 500,000 a week. Well, the Welsh government thought they had a deal, and they in fact announced it, and that's how confident they were about it. All of a sudden, those 5,000 tests from Roche disappeared, at that point, it's worthwhile making the point that at that point, the Welsh health service were well ahead of the English health service when it came to testing. All of a sudden, those 5,000 tests disappeared, and the Welsh government were very careful not to attack London, NHS England, although the opposition in Wales did claim that it was because of NHS England that the Welsh are not getting tested at a decent level. How's that?
Yeah, that kind of covers it. But the problem seems to be that it's now the case that Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales have to go through NHS England, who are going to buy all the testing for the UK in order to get their testing, which essentially means that whatever level England thinks we should be testing at is the level we might be, I don't know, might be forced to agree with. It might well be the case that Scotland puts in an order via NHS England, and NHS England buys what Scotland wants. But it's in some doubt. Jimmy?
Yeah, it kind of undermines the reason that these NHS Scotland is separate. It kind of undermines the fact that it's devolved. I think it's playing politics. I think it's quite simply to make London not look as bad as it looks so far. And I think this is just the thin end of the wedge. I think we're going to see more and more centralising of control, and more the push aside our First Minister, our Chief Medical Officer. I mean, in the press, they've had some not so veiled disparaging of the Chief Medical Officer. Jason Leach, for example, the Clinical Director for Scotland, really impressive guy. I don't think they are particularly impressed down south when you get these people appearing on Breakfast Time or Good Morning Britain and making their spokesmen look like horses' butts, which they kind of have. And do we really want Matt Hancock in charge of anything when we could have Jean Freeman? Because I, for one, don't.
I think we need clarity on what it actually means. If it's a decision about central purchasing, which gives more power to everybody in the UK to purchase what they want, good thing. As long as each nation can get what it
exactly
wants
what they want. Right.
to do what level of testing they deem necessary. If it becomes the fact that NHS England has control of the testing and it disables Wales, Ireland, Scotland from making choices that are different, That's
it's a
a
different thing at
problem.
that point.
That's a problem. Stuart.
I think our First Minister is tiptoeing around this difficult problem that she's been told centrally from London, shut up or else. I know that's a bit colloquial, but she's not entirely, she's been very careful what she says, but it was noticeable today, for example, just almost the last thing she said in her statement to the Holyrood Parliament about it was she almost brought it up as an afterthought. She reminded people that she set up her own scientific advisory group. Now that is her one route to clarify the different needs for Scotland from the UK as a whole.
I don't know, Stuart. I don't know where you get this idea that she's kowtowing to London. Unless you're sitting in the Cobra meetings when these things are discussed and you know who's winning the arguments, I don't see how you can say that.
Yeah, well, there's been quite a bit written about how London is now bringing stuff to Cobra meetings that hasn't been seen by the devolved administrations. They were getting a heads up prior to these Cobra meetings, and they really didn't like the fact that suggestions were coming from the devolved administrations that were actually we're forcing them into making decisions they didn't want. So apparently, certainly informed journalists in London are saying that the devolved administrations are effectively kept in the dark. They find out what's happening at the Cobra meeting in the Cobra meeting rather than beforehand.
Well, I mean, it's a kind of constrained area, so I would be very surprised if the devolved administrations weren't going pretty well organized with knowledge of what the arguments and the options are.
Yeah, but look at the politics.
I just don't see how there's any advantage to accusing the Scottish government of kowtowing when we don't know.
Right. Well, look at the politics.
You know,
what we do know. Yeah, but
we don't know if they agree with them.
No, well, look at the politics. What do we know? We do know that there was almost certainly a late start by our UK government because they announced about herd immunity. I mean, that took 2 weeks before it was reversed. Now that meant that they were 2 weeks late starting to order PPE, starting to order tests. You could argue that she'd have been there a month before that if they'd been really sharp like the Germans. Now that has emasculated the devolved authorities, if you include London too. By the way, Sadiq Khan in London is on the side of the devolved authorities. There is a political background.
Yeah, but I mean, you're making a case based on no facts at all. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, Stuart. What I'm saying is your certainty is misplaced. Jimmy.
But you can't ignore, mate, it's no just one journalist that's saying that the devolved administrations are being sidelined. It's every journalist in London. You know, Nick Watts said it 3 nights in a row on Newsnight.
Well,
that London is taking control of this, and I don't want London taking control of this. I have no trust in a Conservative government to look after the people.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but one of the reasons that I trust this information about the Welsh spat with the Westminster government is that it was broadcast by a journalist from The Spectator who has effectively not criticized this government for anything. If it's coming out of his mouth, it's probably true, because it is a criticism of a government he, in all but name, supports, you know.
Right. There was a change this morning. I happened to catch Victoria Derbyshire show. She is not popular at number 10, as we know. the BBC, it's hard to believe what they say a lot of the time. She interviewed a Labour politician who was one of the first senior politicians to question this whole approach that this government is taking, especially about PPE and testing.
Excuse me.
And I was, my jaw didn't quite hit the floor, but it was, oh, that's rare for the BBC to actually, but there is a very firm grip on the information that's been broadcast.
Yeah, and
I'd agree with that.
And I'm not sure that in reality it would be any different whoever was in charge. Controlling the narrative is important to controlling public reaction.
Well, that's the excuse for controlling the devolved authorities as well.
If you agree with the self-isolation thing, and somebody stands up and says, I have proof, somebody in a government position, in a position of strength, stands up and says, this is absolute crap and I have proof, everybody get down the pub. There would be a sizable number of the population who would do that. So controlling the information is important.
Yeah, but I think what we're seeing is the spin operation. I think we're seeing the cold, dead hand of Dominic Cummings, who looked at how the Scottish government were handling this and thought, they're making us look bad.
Well,
and
they're taking...
He probably went down the George Fawkes route and went, they're making us look bad and they're doing it deliberately.
Well, Jimmy, in this present climate, do you really think that a unionist government would risk being caught out undermining the Scottish government's fight against coronavirus?
I didn't think they give a monkeys. I don't think they give a rat's ass about us.
Yes,
it's
I agree
purely
with
the fact that
Jimmy.
we're making them look bad. That's all it's about, their image.
See, my other point on this is I don't think the Scottish government are making them look bad. I think the Scottish government were just lucky that we were 400 miles north of London.
About what?
It took about the virus getting here. If it had arrived in Scotland when it arrived in London, we wouldn't be in any different position.
No, that's a very good point, because there is a good article this morning about that by a scientist, which basically says Scotland, like UK was behind Italy on the curve. Scotland's behind London on the curve. And when they brought in the strong lockdown in London, from London, for the whole UK, that meant it had a stronger effect on London, because it would have, it was as if it was brought in earlier than they might have otherwise. And
a stronger effect on Scotland.
Yes, a stronger effect on Scotland, because Scotland's behind the curve.
Yes, and that's exactly my point.
And so fewer people are dying at the moment, and it's a better situation.
And possibly giving us that extra, I don't know, week to get things going.
Maybe.
So
yeah, but we've also got a NHS that's in a far more resilient position than England. Of course we're lucky, but you take advantage of that luck. Our NHS hasn't been cut to the bone the way it has in England.
I'm not sure I would say far more resilient, but yeah, Jimmy, and I think these things will play well for the Scottish government at the end of the day. But I hope the honesty goes as far as to say, I mean, I would like to know, if you think about when Nicola made her announcements about shutting the schools and everything, it was on the morning before the UK government did it.
Mm-hmm. But he wasn't going to do it, according to most sources in London would tell you. Boris didn't want to shut the schools. He was forced into it.
Well, it's kind of the point I was going to make. Do we think that Nicola Sturgeon's decision to make the announcement before the British government had their press conference forced their hand? Or was she acting independently on behalf of Scotland by saying, right, we're going to do this now, to hell with the British government?
No, well, it's both. I mean, yes, it forced their hand, but she was acting in the best interest of the Scottish situation.
Right, because the only real difference, the only major difference has been her attitude towards building sites. whereas she said non-essential building sites, shut them down. Whereas Johnson and Gove have both said, stand 2 meters away from each other while you're digging that 2-meter ditch.
It's still an extremely difficult area about what businesses are essential businesses. I'm not going to mention who, but I know somebody that's involved in a business in England. It's not obviously essential for the food and drinks business. It's not as bad as a distillery, which makes a product which won't even be available for sale for 3 years, staying open. But this business produces a product that's required for the distribution of food to supermarkets. That's a little bit remote, and yet,
yeah,
they're staying open.
There's somebody who makes paper bags that you put apples or orange in. Is he classified as having a business that's essential?
Well, the question is, could they get the food to the supermarkets if this business closed down?
Well, exactly. And then, I mean, I know of a business that's open. There's only 2 guys in it, but it's remained open because it's making tabards for volunteers. And the stickers that the supermarkets are using to show people the space to stand apart. Is that essential?
Well, there you go. It's a very difficult area. I'm not going to get into that argument.
So, and she's been pushed a few times. They want a list.
Not going to work.
The opposition party wants a list so that they've got individual businesses to argue about. That's my opinion.
That's what it's about. It's about politics again. The opposition party want a list so they can pick apart that list. So you didn't give them it.
Yeah.
Absolutely right, Jimmy. Absolutely right. Well, can I get some? Yeah, but when we sum up this topic, I'll come back. Okay.
Well, we're about to sum it up, Stuart. Go ahead.
The quote of the crisis so far has got to come from Nicola Sturgeon, and I'll summarise it. I don't underestimate the damage to the economy, but we can repair and return to normal. What we can't do is bring people back to life.
Yeah. True. Right. Moving on from that depressing quote, Stuart. I think we mentioned Craig Murray's blog, which was in support of Alex Salmond's suggestion that there might have been a conspiracy behind the accusations of sexual misdemeanors and rape. Yesterday, Paul Hutchison in the Daily Record published a piece that attacked none of the facts or supposed facts. Okay, let's be generous to Hutchison in Murray's piece. And what he in fact did was he published a picture of Craig Murray's house and basically said he was a rich guy who shouldn't be asking for donations via his blog to support his writing and the court cases he's covered. Because he also covered Assange down south. Do we think Paul Hutchison has the right to play the man instead of the ball? I suppose is the question.
Absolutely not. And do we think Paul Hutchison has the right to be paid for doing his job at the Daily Record? Probably. I'm assuming that he accepts the wages that Daily Record offer. So why is it that he can be paid for writing and somebody else can't?
It's worse than that. I think it's only right that we publicise Paul Hutchison's financial details and where he lives.
Mm-hmm.
Craig Murray, in an answering blog, didn't redact Mr. Hutchison's mobile number from the email that was sent to him. Paul Hutchison did contact him and ask for comment, and the comments were fairly reported at the end of the article. But I would like to hear the explanation why Craig Murray's right to free speech gives Paul Hutchison the right to basically say this guy bought a £600,000 house outright. I mean, for all Mr. Hutchison knows, he sold everything he had in order to do it.
Well, he sold his property down south. That's what allowed him to buy the property up here. And he did also say that he got it in an uninhabitable condition and spent
well,
6 to 9 months actually doing it up.
Asset rich doesn't mean you can afford to buy a pint, I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
The last time
you moved from
last time I saw Craig Murray, he was pulling pints behind the bar at doing the Rabbit Hole, the festival across in Fife.
Aye.
I don't know if he was doing it for pennies, but that's what he was doing. So, would it be reasonable for every person on Twitter to publish a picture of Paul Hutchison's house and his mortgage statement if they disagreed with him?
Yes.
To be honest, mate, given the way that the Deadwood media are almost in their death throes in some situations, I think it might actually have been a desperate plea for relevance by Paul Hutchison. I don't think many people read his columns anymore. It's a bit rich, actually, that a political editor of any newspaper spends time trawling through land registry to try and get a salacious story about somebody in new media who quite probably gets a hell of a lot more hits on his blog than Hutchins has ever had on any story he's printed.
He didn't look far enough back into Mr. Murray's past if he wanted salacious, I have to say. Do we think that our mainstream journalists look down upon the bloggers?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Of course they do. Aye. And the problem they have with that is that, as I say, a lot of the bloggers are getting far more exposure and far more hits than they're getting. People they quite like going for slanted new media at the moment. I purposefully try and read stuff that disagrees with what I think now and again, because it's nice to have your nose stuck in the... Exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't think the Sun, the Record, are producing great stories anymore in a way that they used to. The investigative journalism's gone because everything's broken almost immediately these days. They don't get the time to work on the stories that they used to get. But I think this attack, and it's not just this one, Norrie, there's been a few over the last few months. There's been attacks on various bloggers. And you're right, it's not just playing the man. It's really, it's noticeable that not in any of the facts as reported by, or the way they were reported also by Craig Murray, were taken down in any way, shape or form. It was just a nasty wee attack, really.
It was set to undermine. I mean, Craig Murray, I would think almost inevitably, because he was a diplomat, has contacts that the vast majority of our Scottish journalists could only dream of having. I mean, I remember reading a piece by him describing what went across his desk when he was in South Africa about what the security services information they were producing for the British government. So he has first-hand knowledge of what the security services are capable of. It's legitimate to question whether that's the way they act in this country. Some of us believe some of us remember that they had a file on Harold Wilson and every union leader in the country. I would be surprised if they didn't have a Salmond file.
Oh, there's absolutely, there's a certainty. It's a big, fat, steaming pile of nonsense, probably, but it's definitely there.
Well, the accusation was that MI5 were involved in producing enough material, given that the Salmond investigation, 400 witnesses, 22 police, they couldn't find anything they could take to the Procurator Fiscal. The MI5 had to come up with something along with civil servants answerable to Whitehall, before they could come up with anything at all to take to the Crown Office.
I think, just while we're on this, guys, something that struck me actually yesterday, and I forgot to mention it when I was reading about all this stuff, and it was a point in Craig Murray's blog that I totally agree with. It would be nice to point out to people that what we said during the trial, there was an awful lot of evidence hinted at that wasn't produced. You know, recordings, for example, videos from inside Butte House. None of that was produced, which would tend to suggest that none of it was available because these things didn't happen. Because I don't think for a second that Butte House isn't wired up to the nines. It simply must be for security purposes, if nothing else. They must have cameras everywhere, apart from the loos in the bedrooms, obviously. And they certainly are going to have listening devices all over that thing. There's too many meetings that Alex Salmond and then Nicola Sturgeon have had with world leaders inside there that they would desperately want recorded, because you didn't want to miss a single word in these situations.
If it's a security issue, will the cameras be pointing in the way or out the way?
Both, I would have thought, mate.
You know, which brings me on to the Danny Garvelli piece today, which I mean, I believe that some of these journalists see this as a fight about feminism. But she suggested that these women had no platform. Alex Salmond made one statement when he came out of court, and I haven't seen a quote from Alex Salmond since in anything.
There's not been one, mate. There's just not.
Every single article I've seen about the Alex Salmond case has been anti-Salmond, apart from the Craig Murray one, I think. I think Grousebeater maybe wrote one that was a bit ambiguous. But obviously Danny Garvelli knows who these women are because she's got quotes from them.
Mm-hmm. Noticeable. Including
one that they've been offered protection from physical violence.
Yeah.
How are you going to attack them if you don't know who they are?
Exactly.
And how come she doesn't mention the fact that there were all these she doesn't mention any defense evidence at all. It doesn't mention the fact that there were these women that were turned up to defend Salmond. It's as if it was written by somebody with only one eye. This woman, she could only see the Me Too feminist point of view.
Well, I don't think there was a couple of paragraphs in there that did smack of a bit more realism, I thought. But do you know what's worrying me? We touched on this yesterday. I'm beginning to wonder if I'm totally out of touch.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't worked in a mixed work environment for many years. And I'm beginning to question my values on this. You know, I mean, is it totally inappropriate to put your arm around somebody who you work beside who's upset?
Mm-hmm. Well, it is now.
What are the boundaries now? Is it you never ever touch? You make sure there's a yard between you and every female in the workforce. I mean, can you not have a laugh anymore?
No, yeah, well, probably not. No, we are old by definition, because you and I, all three of us here, would probably say, veganism, yeah, okay, why not, carry on. But see, if you ridicule it, that's now a hate crime. But not to the younger generation.
Yeah, I do worry about certain things. I've got friends who I really respect, you know, like these people and really respect them, but some of the things that come out their mouths, I'm thinking, really? You know, I had somebody the other day going on about this horrendous patriarchy that they live in. And I'm like, it's no horrendous patriarchy. You know what I mean? Every face of the Scottish government throughout this coronavirus thing has been female, almost exclusively. You get a Mike Russell turning up at a press conference and you're shocked. And yet people are going on about a patriarchy. And I just don't recognise that whatsoever as the world that we live in. I think we live in probably the most equal society that we've ever lived in, and it's getting better. But it's noticeable that there are some very strident feminist voices out there that you wonder if they'll ever be happy. You wonder if they'll always feel the need to keep fighting. And obviously, we see things from a different point of view as men. But look, sometimes I think they're shouting too loud and screaming too hard about things that really aren't that bad.
There is a principle. There is a very big, clear principle involved. Can you go back and blame can your father be blamed for what you are? Can you take responsibility? If Hitler had a son that he didn't live with and he grew up in Austria and had nothing to do with Hitler, how would Hitler's son have any responsibility for what Hitler done? Of course not. We cannot, and you cannot hold people responsible for a world that they didn't grow up in.
Aye, that's true. And it does certainly strike me that sometimes these groups do absolutely hold grudges for stuff that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. And if you want to hold a grudge for
I think I'm being more up to date than that. I'm beginning to wonder, if I genuinely am an old fogey, that I really don't understand what this is about, because I see so much now that I say to myself, common sense should solve this.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, the hair tugging accusation. Okay, that's assault. You pull somebody's hair, that's assault.
A pigtail and you yank it, that's assault.
Well, effectively, you poke somebody in the chest, that's assault. It's not sexual assault. And that's what I can't understand. Do we put sexual in front of everything when a woman is a victim of something by a man?
But what if it's not by a real man?
Oh, didn't he that hard shirt?
That is a circle I can never see squared. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to go into the trans thing, my head will explode. That one's totally beyond me. And I think I'll be long dead before they do find a solution where everybody's happy. I don't think it's possible. It's possible. Right, guys, come on then. Now that I've confessed to being a complete throwback to the dinosaur ages, and maybe it's just dementia kicking in, boys. Who knows? Any other subject that caught your eye? Stuart, did you not say something about British politics?
I was thinking about Toby Young.
Oh, right, yeah.
Toby Young, the political commentator from the extreme right. As an aside, an awful lot of extreme right people get on TV these days. It's scary. However, he went too far, but he doesn't think he went too far. He suggested that, yes, it was a good plan, basically the herd immunity plan, and they shouldn't waste any money on saving the lives of old people. And I think that was going a bit too far, so he got a lot of manure was landed on him for that. But I mean, he represents a dangerous eugenics philosophy in the far right and in the government of the UK.
I always like to say to these type of people, yeah, cool, you're right, but unfortunately we're going to have to blow your head off to prove how right you are. You're the first one to go, mate. What use are you to society? None. We agree with you. Eugenics is a great idea. Bang. Problem solved.
I enjoy that. I like that one.
I mean,
I think he's just desperate for attention, mate. I think he's another one like Rod Liddell, Rod Liddell's actually a pretty good writer, but some of the stuff that he writes now is horrific. And it's purely because he needs to get hits on his website or the Spectator website or whoever he's writing for that day. So he will come out with the most ridiculous stuff. I think Toby Young's just exactly the same. He'll say anything to gain attention for himself.
I mean, those decisions, by all accounts, are being made in Italy and Spain. You know, who's most likely to survive? They get the respirator.
Yeah, they were hinting yesterday that those decisions are now having to be made in London. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but they were certainly hinting at it.
No, well, Jimmy, I was watching CNN. Their reporter was reporting live from London, and she said that's what was happening.
That was total. I thought that was total hyperbole for her, though. I'd really, it was a pretty poor piece. I thought CNN could maybe getting herself a better reporter in London or sending Christian Amanpour or somebody over.
But the other side of the coin, of course, is that is what intensive care staff do all the time anyway.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day they have to.
Every day.
I mean, that choice, which, you know, with my own parents was faced, you know, will they be more comfortable continuing with the pain, etc., or do you just not resuscitate it? It's impossible. I mean, if you can ask your parents what they want, obviously it's a lot easier. But these things tend to sneak up on you and hit you right between the eyes, and the question hasn't been asked. Difficult times. And it must be horrendous for medical staff who have to make those decisions when the family aren't around.
No, you're right. But there is also a political slant to an American reporter reporting from the UK about health issues. The argument in America is that because health is free in this country, it's rationed.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's their standard. If you're poor, you can't get any health care. But if you're rich, you can have as many tests as you want, even if they're no good to you at all.
Oh, they'll stick you. You can even have cryogenic. They can freeze you if you're not satisfied. They just freeze you and you'll come back to life.
Well, I'd like to see the statistics for the number of doctors that have been hauled over the coals in America for billing people for tests they didn't need. And I'd be very surprised, because the Tories are great ones for efficiency. We'll give you 3 tests a year, but you can't have 4. Is that us about exhausted everything today, chaps, do you think?
I kind of think so,
Yeah. No funnies, Jimmy?
No, unless you want to laugh at Ruth Davidson's disastrous kind of identifying where the chief of MI6 lives in Edinburgh.
But it wasn't actually his main residence. It was one of his 3 houses.
He's got 3 gaffs. I wonder if somebody's looked at the background of how he bought them.
He's got to move about because he's head MI6.
Well, he's retiring, isn't he?
He's got to have 2 safe houses and another one that he tells Ruth Davidson about. It's probably a decoy. The Russians will be staking out the one in Edinburgh when he's actually in his gaff in London.
I'll know where the Russians will be.
You wouldn't tell Ruth Davidson anything, eh? If he's head of MI6, he'd probably tell Ruth Davidson he stays in Edinburgh. He's actually got a house in Fife.
That's fair enough. I thought it was in Fife anyway, but no, I don't think it's the Russians they'll be worried about. The Russians know what's going on, where everything is in our security services. They've proved that for the last 70 years. No, I suppose they'd be worried about terrorism.
Yes, well, I would think so. Okay, guys, we'll call it a day at that. Thank you, Stuart Lockhead, Jimmy Hutton. Thanks for watching /listening, because the audio will go out as a podcast as well as the video cast, guys. Thanks very much, and we'll no doubt catch you tomorrow, folks. Cheers for now.